welcome to my channel. I'm Tiffany, a retired librarian turned homeschool mom, and this is my precious Kirsten. So if you watched my first video on her full book series, this is in fact my doll wearing, I think this is one of her travel dresses. I'm not sure. It's been a while. This is one of her original dresses, but nonetheless. So in this video, we're going to be looking at Kirsten's cookbook. So this is one of the original cookbooks. So similar to Felicity's, though again, Kirsten is one of the actual original. Felicity came after the first three dolls that were released were Kirsten, Samantha, and Molly. And then Felicity was released next. And then came Addie, who I will be reviewing next. And then Josephina, who I've already reviewed. And I'm not sure who came after that. I think it might have been Kea. Again, you can check out those videos. And then I think Kit was after that. And she's later. But nonetheless, let's go through this book. So this is Kirsten's cookbook. So again, this has, it talks about the pioneer kitchens and how they set their table, how they had a lot of wooden containers. They often brought their own utensils, but then it covers various different things. They have breakfast. So in this, you have the pork sausage patties, which I do believe I've made. This is my book, by the way. I don't know if the craft book was mine originally. The cookbook definitely is. The cookbook I've had for years. I think with the cookbook and the most of the original book series are mine. They're sitting over here. So I've made these. I think I've made the sausage patties. The hard-boiled eggs. I didn't like hard-boiled eggs as a kid. I'll do deviled eggs, but not hard-boiled. The Swedish rice porridge I've never made. The round rye bread, no, I don't think we ever tried it because my mother had a bread machine, but she would never make bread by hand. The homemade butter, no, that takes too long. I don't know if I think I've made the ginger cookies before. So again, it talks a little bit about the pork. It talks about, actually maybe we did make the hard-boiled eggs. I have a feeling I made the hard-boiled eggs. And it looks like there's stains on here. So it's very, very possible. Here's the Swedish rice porridge. It's white rice, which I don't know even if they would have had. Well, they maybe. I'd have to do the research. But nonetheless, vanilla and cream and honey. So this would have been a breakfast. So, and then you have the rye bread, which of course takes by hand, and they talk about flat rye. They made flat breads by rolling bread dough. They didn't have yeast back then, so it was wild. So it was more like a sourdough. So because this obviously is meant for modern times. So they would have they let the mixture ferment or grow. So again, most breads until we were able to create or grow yeast was just like sourdough where you let it ferment. So, and that's a multiplied. And this is why on earth I've never made the butter. It's because you're putting, I believe it's cream. Yep, heavy whipping cream that's cold in a jar. And you have to shake it about 15 minutes and the cream will get so thick you won't hear it and start sticking to the side of the jar, and then you shake it for another 15 to 30 minutes. So you're shaking this thing for close to like an hour well, at least a half an hour. So about 45 minutes. I don't know. So I do not have the energy for that. I don't think I had the energy when I was 8 to be shaking a jar. And then you have the ginger cookies, which I think I've actually made not too long ago. But I did a bunch of comparisons over Christmas. I probably should have made all those cookies. Overdid myself. So, but that's her breakfast. So then at dinner, you have baked ham slices, Swedish potatoes, the cabbage and apple salad, fruit soup, and then Swedish almond rusks. So it talks about them gathering apples. I think it already talked about pork. And let's see. Yeah, they would cabbage and apples from the root cellar. They had dried apples, plums, grapes, and berries. So, and they would have dried it. So ham, Swedish potatoes. I don't know if I've made these. This might be something interesting to make at some point. I have no idea if I ever made them. I don't know if I've ever made the cabbage and apple salad. So, and then the fruit soup, which is a bunch of dried fruit in cold water with cinnamon, cornstarch. So, might be something interesting to make. I don't think I've ever made it. Nonetheless. And then you had the Swedish almond rusk, which looks like a sweet bread. Yeah, this says shortening. This is, yeah, definitely a sweet, what you could call almost like a muffin bread in here. So, and then we have the favorite food. So you have the potato soup, you have the Swedish meatballs, which I have made, the fresh applesauce, which I've made fresh applesauce before, Swedish pancakes, the St. Lucia buns, which I have made, though as a child I did not make them as they're originally intended because they contain saffron. And if anybody here is involved in cooking, there are two extremely expensive spices. Saffron is expensive. I think I bought like a 4 ounces for like $15. Yeah, it's not cheap. And then it had the pepper cooker, which are peppernickel cookies. Warning on that recipe, cut it. I remember making those. It makes a lot. Yeah, it makes 3 dozen. That is way too many cookies. So I remember, I made them once and we ended up leaving them at a school potluck. So the potato soup is interesting. It does contain bacon and onion, and milk, and you mash the potatoes, which is, again, interesting. So it looks like it's floating bacon. I don't know if I've actually made this. I've obviously made potato soup before. And then the Swedish meatballs, which I know I've made before. We've been celebrating the doll's birthday since Kirsten's is in June. So it's June 8th. So I'll probably be doing the Swedish meatballs for her birthday. I don't know if this has the sauce that goes with it. Maybe. No, it does. Yeah, it has. You make the gravy with it. Okay, and then you have the fresh applesauce. Strangely enough, applesauce is mentioned in Felicity's books. Nonetheless, it talks about, drying apples. So, and then it has the Swedish pancakes, which I do think I've made. These are more like what in the United States we would call crepes. So they're very thin pancakes and you wrap them up. So these are pretty good. I believe I made those, and talking about jams and preserves. So, and then here's the St. Lucia buns. So these are in fact made with saffron. Is there actually saffron in this one? Yeah. It's 1/4 teaspoon of saffron. So, I don't know if I used this recipe. But these are actually really, really good. I highly recommend them. Again, I've made them with saffron as an adult. I think I've been making them every Christmas for the last year or two. They are, in fact, very, very good. And then you have I can't even pronounce this. These are pepperwinkle cookies. They're like cinnamon, ginger, and cloves, but again, and maple syrup. But again, this makes 3 dozen. So that's like 36 cookies, and they're cut out cookies, but it makes way too many. So cut this recipe. And I do believe that's it for her cookbook. Yes. It talks about a pioneer party. It talks about berry bees and fall apple bees and spring gardening bees, which is just when people got together, and winter baking bees. Again, they get together and have fun together. So I like this book. Again, I've had this for years. As I've mentioned, I've made some of the recipes. I will probably make more out of this book. This is fun. Again, I like the history of it. That's one of the reasons I'm covering this. So it talks about the cooking and the time where, again, she comes from a poor farmer family that immigrates from Sweden because they're a poor farming family, and it's not necessarily serfdom, but it's close. They're not tied to the land, but they're often renting land, and there's not a lot of land, and it's rocky land. There's not a lot of good land. And then, of course, Kirsten comes over earlier. By the 1860s, there's a flood because people are starving. So that's when I'll be covering that in one of the films that I'm covering for this, which talks about family that comes over later. So nonetheless, that is it for this review. I do, again, enjoy the cookbooks as it falls on the floor. But nonetheless, so that is it. If you like what you see, be sure to like and subscribe. I will be covering the rest of Kirsten's collection, which has her craft books. She has a theater kit. She has some short stories. She has one mystery. So I'll be covering all of those. I'll be covering some films and a few other things. She also has a world book. So nonetheless, and then we'll be moving on to Addie and then Samantha. So check out the rest of the channel, and I will see you next time. Thank you.